The fence had already been cut when I arrived. It hung open just enough to suggest someone else had gone through recently. The wire bent inward, not out. That detail should have mattered more to me at the time. I noticed it, registered it, and still stepped through. The building used to be a regional treatment center. It shut down in the late 90s after funding dried up. Officially, everything inside was removed. Equipment, records, anything sensitive. Unofficially, people said the place had been emptied too fast. The parking lot was cracked and flooded in places, rainwater reflecting the orange glow of a distant streetlight. The main entrance doors were gone, ripped off their hinges long ago. Only the frame remained, rusted and sharp. I turned on my flashlight and stepped inside. The air smelled old, not rotten, just stale, like dust that had been sitting undisturbed for years. My footsteps echoed more than I expected, the sound stretching down corridors I couldn't yet see. The lobby was wide and bare. Ceiling tiles sagged, some collapsed entirely. A reception desk sat crooked in the center, drawers pulled out and left open. Someone had spray-painted arrows on the walls at some point, pointing deeper into the building. I followed them. The first hallway branched into several smaller corridors. Patient rooms, offices, storage. Doors hung ajar. Some had been kicked in, others looked untouched, as if no one had bothered to see what was inside. I picked one at random. The room was empty except for a single metal bed frame bolted to the floor. No mattress, no sheets, just the frame, rusted and scratched. The walls were marked with faint lines, shallow grooves that ran horizontally at about shoulder height. They were too even to be accidental. I backed out and continued down the hall. As I moved deeper, the temperature dropped, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed my breath fogging slightly when I exhaled. My flashlight beam caught movement at the edge of my vision more than once. Rats, probably, or loose plastic shifting in the draft. Then I reached a door that was closed. That stood out immediately. Every other door I'd passed had been left open, vandalized, or damaged. This one was intact, painted a dull institutional green. The handle wasn't rusted. It looked used. I listened. Nothing. I turned the handle and pushed. The room beyond was darker than the others, the windows boarded from the inside. My light swept across the floor, catching something written on the wall opposite the door. Not graffiti, handwriting. It covered nearly the entire surface, overlapping lines of text written in black marker. Some of it had faded, but most was still readable. I am still here. They said they would come back. You hear them when it's quiet. Don't let them know you can see. The last line was repeated dozens of times. I stepped back into the hallway and closed the door behind me. That was when I heard the sound upstairs. It was faint, a single footstep, then another, slow, careful. I froze. The building was supposed to be empty. I hadn't seen any fresh trash, no recent footprints in the dust, and the steps weren't echoing randomly. They were moving with direction, pacing across the floor above me. I stood still, counting the seconds between sounds. They stopped. After a long pause, something scraped. Not dragged, adjusted. Like a chair leg being nudged into place. I should have left then. Instead, I followed the stairs. They were at the end of the hall, concrete steps spiraling upward. The handrail was cold when I touched it, damp with condensation. As I climbed, the smell changed. Less dust, more metal, and something faintly chemical. The second floor layout mirrored the first, but felt tighter. Lower ceiling, narrower halls. The flashlight beam didn't reach as far. Halfway down the corridor, I noticed something on the floor. Footprints. They weren't dusty impressions like mine. They were clean, as if someone had walked through after the dust had already settled. Bare feet, judging by the shape. They stopped abruptly in front of a doorway. I followed them with my light. The room was empty. No writing, no furniture, just a clean floor and walls that looked wiped recently. Behind me, something exhaled. Not loud, not close enough to touch, but close enough to hear. I turned too fast. The beam swinging wildly. The hallway was empty. The footprints were still there, leading away from me now. Retreating. I backed toward the stairs, keeping the light trained forward. My heartbeat was loud enough that I was sure it could be heard. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the building settling, the faint whistle of air moving through broken vents. The footsteps resumed, this time below me. One floor down, moving slowly, methodically, staying just out of sight. I realized then what the writing on the wall meant. Don't let them know you can see. I shut off my flashlight. The darkness was immediate and total. My eyes strained uselessly, but my ears sharpened. The footsteps paused again, as if reacting to the sudden absence of light. Something shifted. A breath. A soft, wet sound I couldn't place. I didn't move. Minutes passed. Or seconds. It was impossible to tell. Then, from somewhere in the building, a door creaked open. Not near me. At the entrance. Heavy footsteps followed. Multiple this time. Loud. Human. Voices echoed faintly, distorted by the halls. Laughter. Someone calling out. I turned the flashlight back on and ran. I didn't look behind me. I didn't stop until I was back through the lobby and out into the parking lot, lungs burning, hands shaking. When I reached my car, I realized something was wrong. The windshield was fogged from the inside, and on the glass, traced in clear lines through the condensation, were fingerprints, pressed from the inside out. The entrance wasn't hidden. That should have been the first warning. I'd expected the tunnel to be buried or sealed, maybe half collapsed by erosion or blocked by fencing. Instead, it sat open beneath the overpass, concrete mouth exposed, water slowly dripping from the ceiling like it was breathing. This stretch of rail line had been abandoned for years. Freight traffic was rerouted after a partial collapse further north. No trains, no maintenance crews, no reason for anyone to be down here. Yet the ground leading inside was worn smooth. I switched on my flashlight and stepped into the tunnel. The temperature dropped immediately. Cold air rushed outward, carrying the smell of wet stone and rusted metal. The walls curved inward slightly, narrowing my vision and amplifying every sound I made. Each step echoed back at me, delayed just enough to feel wrong. The beam of my light caught old warning signs bolted into the wall. Most were unreadable, the paint peeled away by moisture. One still showed a faded symbol for electrical hazard. There were no cables. I moved deeper. About 30 meters in, the sound changed. The echo softened, absorbed by something ahead. I swept the light forward and saw why. Fabric, rags, blankets, tarps, layered thick against the far wall, forming a crude barrier. Someone had built insulation, packed tightly between concrete and steel supports. It wasn't abandoned debris, it was deliberate. I stopped walking. Water dripped somewhere beyond the fabric, steady and rhythmic. I listened for breathing, for movement. Nothing. I should have turned back then. Instead, I edged closer and nudged the material aside with my flashlight. The space beyond opened wider than the tunnel behind me, a maintenance chamber. The floor here was dry, swept clean, not spotless, but intentionally cleared. Empty food tins were stacked neatly in one corner. A battery-powered lantern sat on a crate, turned off but warm when I touched it. Someone had been here recently. My light flicked across the far wall and landed on markings scratched directly into the concrete. Lines, tallies, grouped in fives. I counted without meaning to. 112. Below them, a single sentence had been carved deeply enough to leave raw white stone exposed. It only moves when you do. The sound came from behind me. A soft shuffle. Bare skin against concrete. I spun, heart hammering, but the tunnel entrance was empty. The fabric barrier hadn't moved. My own footprints still marked the damp ground where I'd walked in. Then I realized something else. There was a second set. They were faint, almost smudged, overlapping mine, but they were facing inward, as if someone had followed me inside and stopped just short of the chamber. I stood still. The dripping stopped. The silence stretched long enough that my ears began to ring. I was acutely aware of my own breathing, loud and uneven, bouncing off the curved walls. I took one careful step backward. Nothing happened. Another step. The lantern behind me clicked on. Its yellow glow filled the chamber, softer than my flashlight, but wide enough to reveal the corners I hadn't seen. In the farthest one, pressed flat against the wall, was a shape darker than the shadow around it, human-sized, but wrong. It didn't stand. It leaned, flattened as if pressed there by force. Limbs folded too tightly, angles sharp where they shouldn't be. Its surface looked slick, like wet stone or skin stretched thin. It didn't move. I didn't either. The sentence on the wall made sense now. It only moves when you do. My legs burned from holding still. My arms shook. Sweat ran cold down my spine despite the chill. Somewhere deeper in the tunnel, something exhaled. Not the thing in the corner, something else. I realized then that the tallies weren't days. They were attempts. Slowly, carefully, I shifted my weight forward. The thing peeled itself from the wall, not stepping, sliding. It moved in perfect silence, matching my motion exactly. When I stopped, it stopped. When I leaned back, it leaned forward, always maintaining the same distance. Behind it, the tunnel grew darker, swallowing the light. The fabric barrier at the entrance rustled slightly, disturbed by air moving the wrong direction. I understood what had been happening here. Someone had been living in this tunnel not because it was safe, but because it was predictable. Motion meant danger. Stillness meant survival. They had learned the rules and carved them into the wall for themselves. And now, I was breaking them. My calf cramped. I stumbled half a step. The thing surged forward instantly, closing the distance in a single fluid motion. Its surface rippled, reshaping itself as it moved, details blurring like it wasn't meant to be seen up close. I screamed and ran. The rules shattered. The tunnel erupted with sound, scraping, wet impacts, something dragging itself along the ceiling above me. My light bounced wildly, barely keeping up as the ground blurred beneath my feet. I didn't look back. The air grew warmer as I neared the entrance, the daylight spilling in like a promise I wasn't sure I'd reach. I burst out onto the gravel, tripping and rolling hard, skin tearing on stone. The tunnel behind me was silent, too silent. I scrambled up and ran until my lungs burned and my vision tunneled. Later, when I watched the footage back from my camera, I noticed something I hadn't felt at the time. During the last 30 seconds inside the tunnel, my footsteps weren't the only ones echoing. They were being matched perfectly. The path to the tower wasn't on any map. I found it by accident, branching off a marked trail deep in the forest. The official route stopped miles back, where warning signs told hikers to turn around due to unstable terrain. Beyond that, the trees grew tighter, their branches interlocking overhead, blocking out most of the light. The gravel path I followed was narrow but maintained. Not clean, just used. That detail bothered me more the longer I walked. After nearly an hour, the trees opened into a clearing, and I saw the tower for the first time. It rose above the canopy like a scar. Concrete base, steel framework climbing upward, topped with a small enclosed room wrapped in fogged glass. An old fire observation tower, the kind built decades ago to spot smoke before satellites made them obsolete. Officially, it had been decommissioned in the early 80s. Unofficially, it looked intact. No graffiti, no broken windows. The ladder bolted to the side was rusted but sturdy. A small maintenance shed sat nearby, door slightly ajar. I walked the perimeter first. The ground around the tower was worn into a circular path, grass pressed flat as if something had been pacing it for years. In the dirt were grooves, drag marks that led back toward the ladder and stopped abruptly at the base. I opened the shed. Inside were shelves stacked with supplies that didn't belong in an abandoned place. Water containers, old canned food, spare batteries. A notebook sat on a workbench, its cover warped from moisture. I flipped it open. The first pages were dates, hundreds of them, each followed by a short note. Clear visibility. Movement in Sector 3. Lights again after midnight. The handwriting changed over time, growing shakier, more cramped. The last entry wasn't dated. It simply read, "Do not go up if you feel watched. It already knows you're there." I stepped back outside. The forest was quiet. No wind, no birds. The kind of silence that feels intentional, like something holding its breath. I looked up at the tower. The glass at the top reflected the sky, but not evenly. One panel was darker, as if something inside was blocking the light. I climbed anyway. Each rung rang softly under my weight, the metal cold and damp. Halfway up, I noticed scratches on the ladder rails. Long, shallow marks that ran parallel all the way to the top. They weren't rust. They were worn smooth. The higher I climbed, the stronger the sensation became. Not fear exactly, more like awareness, like stepping into the edge of someone else's attention. When I reached the platform, the hatch was closed. That alone was wrong. I pushed it open. The observation room smelled like old fabric and ozone. The interior was small, just enough space for a chair and a wraparound console beneath the windows. The equipment was outdated but functional. Binoculars, radio units, a compass bolted into the floor. The chair faced outward. Someone had been sitting there recently. The seat cushion was still indented. I walked to the windows, scanning the forest below. From this height, the clearing looked perfectly circular, the surrounding trees forming a dense wall. The path I'd taken in was barely visible. Then I noticed something moving at the edge of the trees. Not crossing the clearing, circling it. Slowly, always staying just within the shadows. I leaned closer to the glass. The movement stopped. Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, to not draw attention. I remembered the notes in the shed, the warnings written by someone who had clearly spent years here. This tower wasn't for watching fires. It was for watching something else. Behind me, the radio crackled. I spun around. Static hissed through the speaker, then faded into a low, rhythmic clicking, like a microphone picking up something tapping against it from far away. I reached for the power switch. The clicking stopped instantly. From the forest below, a shape stepped into the clearing. It was tall, too tall. Its outline blurred against the trees, details refusing to settle no matter how long I stared. It didn't look up at the tower. It didn't need to. I felt the pressure then, like hands pressing gently but firmly against my chest, pinning me in place. Not physical contact. Something heavier, older. The notebook entries made sense now. The tower wasn't abandoned. It was occupied in shifts. The chair creaked softly behind me. I hadn't moved. I didn't turn around. In the reflection of the glass, I saw it. Something stood inside the room with me, impossibly thin, its shape folding in on itself to fit the space. Its surface reflected light wrong, swallowing parts of the room behind it. It was facing the forest, watching. I understood the rule without being told. If you watch with it, you are safe. If you leave, you are seen. My legs shook. Sweat ran down my back. Every second stretched thin, my mind racing through impossible choices. The shape in the clearing below tilted its head. The thing beside me leaned forward slightly, as if acknowledging it. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the room was empty. The chair was still warm. I didn't wait. I climbed down faster than I should have, hands slipping on metal, heart pounding so hard it drowned out every other sound. I didn't look back at the clearing. I didn't look up at the tower. I ran until the trees swallowed the structure entirely. Later, safe at home, I checked satellite images of the area. The tower wasn't there. The clearing wasn't there. The forest was unbroken. But when I zoomed in far enough, I noticed something else. A perfect circle of trees, slightly darker than the rest, and at its center, a single narrow line leading in.